She ran toward the lair as fast as she could. "Come forth," a voice commanded. It all started with those words. Thrush. His magic energy sent vibrations way stronger than the shaman's. But that wasn't all. As he showed his power, the shadow under Jin-Woo's feet began to grow. It spread out like ink spilled in water, moving super fast and freaking everyone out. "Whoa," one hunter shouted. "What's going on?" Another asked, staring at the dark shadow creeping beneath their feet. The Strike Squad hunters were totally amazed, and a little scared as they watched it spread. How was this even possible? Even the most skilled hunters had never seen anything like this before. They were shocked, and fear began to creep into their hearts. Pyuhun lay there helplessly, his body trembling as he watched everything unfold. What is happening here? His question was answered when a dark shadow spread across the entire floor of the lair. Kurush, a faf. The black surface shimmered, and shadowy figures in black armor began to rise from the ground. Kurush skill, Monarch's domain has been activated. Kurush, Jin-Woo cracked a small smile. Perfect, he muttered under his breath. Monarch's domain was a powerful skill he had gained after reaching level 70 in the demon's castle. And now it was making all the shadow soldiers on its surface 50% stronger. As Jin-Woo's shadow soldiers got stronger, he could see how confident they were. He couldn't help but smile, proud of how far they'd come. The 50 dark warriors stood around him like a protective shield. Grar? The high-orc warriors, known for being fearless, took a step back. Even they were intimidated by Jin-Woo and his army. "The orcs are retreating," someone shouted. "What's going on?" Another hunter asked, confusion in their voice. The situation was shocking, and it left the hunters stunned. But despite their fear, a small spark of hope began to grow. "Did you feel that too?" One mage hunter whispered. "Yeah," another replied. "Does any of this even make sense?" The mage hunters, who were highly attuned to magic, could feel their hearts racing as they sensed the surge of power in the air. Who would have thought that this E-rank hunter they'd brought along as backup was the source of all this power? Is this really magic? It feels way creepier than anything a shaman could do. The air in the boss's lair grew thick with some kind of dark energy, and it was almost impossible to catch a breath. The hunters breathed a sigh of relief, thankful they weren't facing this kind of power. Meanwhile, the high orcs looked like they were about to panic any second. As soon as the shadow soldiers showed up, things just got way better for Jin-Woo. Now, instead of one hunter against 50 orcs, there were 50 soldiers ready to take on those same 50 orcs. These weren't just any ordinary soldiers. They were way tougher than you'd think. Jin-Woo didn't wait, he charged forward, ready to fight. The shaman let out a loud yell. "Why are you all just standing there? Kill that human right now." His voice was filled with magic, which seemed to pump up the high orcs. They lifted their weapons and let out a fierce roar. Graza, Shushin, Shushk, Shushk. Jin-Woo's daggers sliced through the shadow soldiers with deadly precision. Even without any buffs, he was unstoppable. His movements were so fast. They left behind a blur of afterimages that even the elite hunters couldn't keep up with. The orcs screamed in terror. Gauze, 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 gauze. Blood and bodies flew everywhere. As Jin-Woo struck again and again, the hunters watched in awe, their eyes wide with disbelief. "Hey," one of them muttered. "Yeah," another agreed. "He's like the vice president." And nearby, Times was a whirlwind of motion. Her nickname was the Dancer, and for good reason. When she fought, her movements were as graceful and fast-paced as a dancer in a high-energy routine, even though she usually stayed calm and collected. When she attacked, it was like watching a perfectly choreographed performance. Han was so embarrassed by this that she wouldn't let anyone use it, which meant not many people even knew about it. But every now and then it still came up. The luggage carrier's moves were as smooth as Han's, or maybe even better. If Han was like a graceful dancer, Jin-Woo was more like a powerful storm smashing through magic beasts with ease. Grod. The shadow soldiers were holding their own too, fighting without any trouble. Tank led the charge with Iron soldiers close behind. Right at the front, Iron puffed out his chest and let out a mighty roar. Gro-Ru, Tetsura. This was his pre-battle ritual, meant to scare the enemy. But this time something went wrong. A message flashed in his mind. Skill, epic taunt failed due to high resistance. Iron's face turned red with rage. He gripped his massive iron hammer and started swinging it fiercely at the orcs. Whoosh! Crack! Crunch! The sound of his hammer crushing armor and bone echoed across the battlefield. The orc screamed as they tried to dodge, but iron was unstoppable. Arg! One orc cried, clutching his side. Gurra! Another wailed, falling to the ground. Some of the hunters watching from a distance felt sorry for the orcs caught in Iron's path. He was like a force of nature, smashing everything in his way, without mercy. On the other hand, Igris fought with calm precision. Her blade moved swiftly and quietly, cutting down enemies one by one without wasting any energy. While Iron's attacks were loud and brutal, Igris's were quick and silent, almost like a dance. The orcs didn't even have time to shout before Igris's sword sliced through them. Peshk! With every swing of his blade, another orc head flew off. The regular shadow soldiers were struggling against the high orcs, but they had one big advantage: they could fight forever and heal instantly. While the foot soldiers kept the orcs busy, the mage soldiers lit up the sky with fiery attacks. Ak-boom! Ak-foom! Ak! The high orcs were disappearing fast. The shaman's chubby cheeks wiggled with rage. How dare this weak human? Its glaring eyes locked onto Jin-Woo as its first target. Those black-armored soldiers. They'd been summoned by him. Once he was dead, his troops would vanish too. The shaman started chanting a spell aimed at Jin-Woo. Its lips moved fast, like it was racing against time. In no time, 5 strong curses were ready. The Song of Impediment, the Song of Blindness, the Song of High Fever, the Song of Extreme Pain, and the Song of Sleep. Done, the shaman sneered, looking pleased with itself. Jin-Woo could feel traces of mana heading his way as soon as the curses were cast. Magic. He exchanged a sharp glance with the shaman. It smirked at him. Too late, human. Unlike regular magic, curses couldn't be escaped. Once cast, that was it. They would turn him into a mindless zombie ready to be cut down by the high orc warrior's brutal machetes. It would be the perfect end for a human who didn't know his place. But then, Jin-Woo heard that familiar electric sound. Ipeen. Impertuend. Irregular status condition has occurred. Impertuend. The irregular status condition has been removed by buff immunity. Imperpeen. Peen. 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 Impertuem. Er's curse. Blindness has been removed. Emperor, any of the 5 curses could do their worst. Empertuem. They were gone. Keen. Now Jin-Woo was the one smiling. When Jin-Woo first became a player, he got an awesome buff called the Great Spellcaster Kandiaru's Blessing. This long-lasting buff made him super tough. It said health and longevity. You're protected from all diseases, poisons and bad effects. Your healing powers get supercharged when you're asleep. Thanks to this blessing, Jin-Woo didn't have to worry about magic that could hurt his body or mind, like curses. The shaman's eyes widened in shock. What? He stuttered, clearly spooked by what he saw. As the boss of an A-rank dungeon, it quickly realized that its curses had been lifted by some mysterious force. Wait, how? It didn't make sense. To break a curse like mine, you'd need powerful magic, or a blessing from someone stronger than me. Does that mean one of these humans has more power than I do? But before the dungeon could even think about it further, a sudden shooting pain in its foot made it cry out in agony. Burga! The orc looked down and saw Jin-Woo's dagger, Night Killer, sticking out of its foot. It growled angrily, baring its teeth. Grr! The shaman glared at Jin-Woo with furious eyes, its face turning red like a ripe tomato. How dare you? Jin-Woo quickly slashed at another orc charging toward him. Then he mouthed a warning to the shaman. Sit tight and wait your turn. In other words, don't do anything crazy. How dare a weakling like you? The shaman still managed to get angry. Even in its last moments, Jin-Woo's expression turned cold. Actually, he could have taken down the shaman as soon as the battle started, but he had held back, so the shaman would feel the same fear it had made other hunters feel. But it seemed he hadn't done enough to scare off the beast. Its eyes were still glowing with life. Well, then, all right, time to give you a show. Let's really show what a necromancer can do. The Shadow Monarch looked around like he was about to dig into a feast spread just for him. Dark curls of smoke twisted up from the bodies of the high orcs, as if they'd been waiting for Jin-Woo to give the signal. And then he did. Araz! Jin-Woo said, his voice calm but powerful. Beginning shadow extraction attempt. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the air sharp. terrifying, and unlike anything anyone could have expected. The shaman's eyes nearly jumped out of his head. What in the world?
He gasped, but before he could finish, something cut him off.
Black hands began to rise from the shadows around the high orc corpses. The shaman froze in shock. Shadow extraction successful. Jin-Woo smiled faintly as the shadowy figures stepped into the light, joining his growing army of darkness. The shaman's voice trembled. My warriors. They've turned into undead. The battle was intense. 50 of their warriors had fallen. But then 50 new soldiers showed up, all dressed in black armor. The shaman quickly realized something: this mysterious human wasn't leading just any ordinary army. In fact, the situation was looking pretty grim. What started as a fight between 50 soldiers and 50 high orcs had now become an even matchup, 100 versus 100. Even the toughest orc warriors who had faced fearsome enemies before lost their courage when they saw their fallen comrades return as shadow soldiers. The once fearless fighters growled and snarled, but now stepped back in fear. Their worst nightmare was becoming zombie-like soldiers for the enemy instead of dying honorably and reaching a warrior's heaven. Jin-Woo showed off his power, and it was working just as he hoped. The warriors were scared. But would the shaman be afraid too? He looked at the shaman's face. Jin-Woo smiled, relieved that it was finally working. The shaman's eyes filled with fear. It remembered someone who could turn the dead into shadows, and now realized Jin-Woo must be that person. There couldn't be two people with such a rare power. Whoa, that's him. How did we even end up here? The moment the shaman realized what was happening, its mind went blank. All it could feel now was pure fear. Jin-Woo nodded in satisfaction. Perfect. Just perfect. He had saved the shaman for last, and his plan to scare them a bit had worked like a charm. Jin-Woo turned and smiled, but then his eyes widened in surprise as he spotted someone familiar standing at the cave entrance. Who is that again? The face looked familiar, but he couldn't quite place her. After a moment it clicked: KM Chas, one of the top S-rank hunters from the Hunters Guild. What is she doing here? But Jin-Woo's surprise was nothing compared to Haeun's shock. Her eyes widened as she stared at Jin-Woo and the shadow soldiers surrounding him. Wait a second. What are those things? Ashun thought to herself. At first glance, she thought they might be six-fang minions, but there were way too many of them to be just that. Most mage hunters who could control minions could only handle one at a time. If someone could summon two, they were considered super skilled, like the best of the best. But no one she knew could control three. So, how many minions were there? It was mind-blowing. Someone had summoned more than 100. He didn't take long at all. He'd summoned several dozen minions all at once. It was something I wouldn't have believed if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. She was Humfro and were Korea's top 10 hunters, and even she was blown away by his skills. But there wasn't time to think about that now. She glanced past the shadowy figures toward the strike team. They looked like they were struggling. Some of them collapsed onto the ground too exhausted to stand. No matter who Jin-Woo was or what he could do, helping him fight those orcs came first. Think quick and move fast, she told herself. She tightened her grip on her weapon with both hands and stepped forward, ready for action. Then their eyes met. The look in his eyes said it all. I don't need your help. I'll stay back and watch. She couldn't figure it out. Why? She couldn't figure it out. Why? Jin-Woo was amazing. He could lead an entire battalion with ease. But there were so many high orcs here, and their boss was even stronger. Did he really think they could handle this alone? Plus, Jin-Woo must have used up almost all his energy controlling such a huge group at once. Taken couldn't figure out how he was doing this alone, but she decided to put down her pickaxe anyway. Besides, it wasn't exactly the best weapon. It was just something she'd borrowed from the digging team. She really wanted to see what Hunter Jin-Woo-san had planned against the remaining orcs. She was super curious. And even though things didn't make complete sense, she trusted him completely. Her heart was racing with excitement. Jin-Woo let out a big sigh of relief when Haeun made her decision. That was a close call. He knew this was just the start and he couldn't afford any distractions now. Jin-Woo let the boss beat Kahan almost to death, so he could fight all the magic beasts himself. Kahan never gives up, he fights with his last breath. Jin-Woo really wanted to smash the shaman, but waited until Kahan dropped his sword. Then it was time to act. Kahan quickly understood what was happening, and that made Jin-Woo happy. She didn't argue, just stepped back without a fight. He grinned, turned around, and shouted, "My shadows." His voice boomed through the dungeon, and instantly, every soldier snapped into battle position. Thud. For a few seconds, everything was quiet, like the whole place was holding its breath. Then Jin-Woo pointed at the shaman and said simply, "Go." In a flash, over 100 shadow soldiers rushed forward, heading straight for the trembling high orc warriors. The ground rumbled, the cave shook, and even the onlookers' eyes rattled as the soldiers charged. Thud, thud, thud. It felt like everything around them was vibrating from the force of their attack. Meanwhile, Jinchul sprinted through the dungeon as fast as his legs could carry him. Huff, huff, huff. His breathing was ragged and uneven, his chest heaving from the effort of running so hard. After catching his breath, he stood up straight and spotted a woman with short hair at the entrance of the boss's lair. He recognized her right away. Hien Shansa. Was there any other female hunter as tough and impressive as she was? But why wasn't she joining the fight? It seemed weird, so he walked over to her. Jinchul stepped inside and took in the wild scene before him.
What the? Aw?
He muttered, his eyes wide with shock. Soldiers in black armor were battling high orcs. But this was no ordinary fight. The high orcs let out terrifying screams. Gaw, gaw, and the sounds made Jinchul's ears hurt. It would have been intense enough if it were just the armored soldiers. But things got even weirder. There was a massive warrior, who seemed way too big to be human, and some giant black bears that looked like they were smoking. To top it all off, there were high orcs wearing black armor too. Suddenly a voice called out, "Long time no see, Manager Wu." Jinchul froze as he turned to face the speaker, his mind racing in shock. "It's been a while. Do you know what those things are? They don't look like magic beasts. They're minions summoned by that man," Tainan said, pointing at Jin-Woo in the middle of the battle. Jinchul took off his sunglasses and watched Jin-Woo fight. With 2 daggers, Jin-Woo was slicing through the crowd of orcs like it was easy. The more I watch him, the more he seems like a high-level brawler. But wait, he can also use summoning magic. Jinchul's hunch turned out to be spot on. As Jin-Woo moved his lips, another wave of minions erupted from the ground. Jinchul's eyes widened in disbelief. "Wow!" he exclaimed. How many could Jin-Woo actually summon? If this was Hunter Sung's ability, no wonder President Go was so interested in him. Jinchul stood there with his mouth hanging open, thinking about how President Go must have seen this potential in Jin-Woo early on. Finally, Hyen tore her gaze away from Jin-Woo to ask Jinchul a question, her eyes filled with curiosity. "Manager Wu, what are you doing here?" Hyen asked, sounding surprised. "Did our guild contact the surveillance team already?" Jinchul quickly hid his shock and smiled calmly at Hyen. "No, we just happened to be in the area and noticed something weird going on with this gate," he explained. "We thought it'd be a good idea to get the strike squad out of here." He glanced back at Jin-Woo, making sure everything was under control. He was witnessing Jin-Woo's abilities for the first time, and they were on full display. Jin-Woo was taking down an A-ranked dungeon, all by himself, which was no easy feat. The man didn't need anyone's help. It seemed like he could handle it all alone.
Yeah, let's just stay back.
Kaisen agreed. There wasn't much room for anyone else in this fight. Not even another high-ranking hunter. Jinchul turned to Hanant with a curious expression. "Who is this guy?" he asked, clearly impressed by what he was seeing. Jinchul was part of this group too, and they were keeping secrets about Jin-Woo locked away tight. Maybe Manager Wu knew something. "I know a little," Jinchul said. Who is he really?" Jinchul put his sunglasses back on. "I'm afraid that's top secret info." Us. The shaman was furious. When it first appeared in this place, it had only one mission: hunt humans. Us. But look at how everything turned out. Could a single human really wipe out an entire tribe? That didn't seem right. The shaman watched in horror as its warriors were being torn apart. Its eyes blazed red with fury. Those pesky creatures. I'll crush them all. If its curses weren't working, the shaman would have to take matters into its own hands after blessing itself. Song of rage. Song of strength. Song of giants. Song of dragon fire. The shaman roared out the chants, and suddenly it began to grow bigger and bigger until it stood nearly 10 meters tall. A surge of energy coursed through its body, boosting strength, speed, stamina, and confidence to new heights. The shaman swung its massive arms, shoving aside shadow soldiers with ease. Taking a deep breath, it unleashed a mighty roar.
Whoosh!
A roaring blackish-red flame burst out, engulfing enemies in an instant. The intense heat vaporized them in the blink of an eye, leaving nothing but victory in its wake. No soldier hit by the flames was left standing. If they didn't lose their whole body, they lost a limb and couldn't fight anymore. Then another wave of fire shot out right after the first one. The shaman watched as its attacks cut down soldier after soldier, and let out a confident roar. "Do you still think I, Kargalgan, am no match for you?" It shouted. "Yup," came the reply from above the shaman's head. Startled, the shaman quickly put up a shield spell, and looked up, but Jin-Woo was too fast. He slammed his fist into the beast's head. "Bomb! Raw crack!" The shaman's head smacked the ground hard, cracking the cave floor like a spider's web. Jin-Woo had done this before he'd even taken down Vulcan, who was way bigger than this shaman. "You have defeated the master of the dungeon." As soon as Jin-Woo landed back on his feet, he heard the ping of good news. "Palm, you have leveled up." "Hell yeah!" Jin-Woo pumped his fist in the air, grinning from ear to ear. Jin-Woo had leveled up not once, not twice, but 3 times. First when he was fighting with his stealth skill on, then again after clearing out those high orcs in the lair, and finally when he beat the boss. He couldn't believe he'd gotten so much from clearing this A-rank dungeon. It was way more than he expected. He felt super thankful to Yoon-suk for giving him another job today. Awesome. Jin-Woo walked over to the boss with a big smile on his face, feeling like he was on top of the world. The shaman's body, which had been grown big with magic, was now back to its normal size. Jin-Woo noticed a big essence stone stuck in a necklace around its neck, but didn't want it. "I've already gotten all these experience points." This dungeon belonged to the Hunters Guild. If he needed an essence stone from an A-rank dungeon, he could get one legally from a place he'd earned himself. Jin-Woo fixed his eyes on something else, the black smoke curling up from the shaman's body. He gulped, feeling a wave of nervousness wash over him. His mind zipped back to when he tried to capture Barca's shadow in the Red Gate, but failed miserably. Back then he wasn't as strong or experienced, and even with help from Igris and Iron, those tough warriors from the night ranks, defeating Barca had been a real struggle. But now, Jin-Woo felt like a different person altogether. He had defeated the shaman without much trouble. Spending those tough 7 days in the demon's castle had definitely paid off. Jin-Woo gave a simple command to the swirling black smoke. "Arise." A cold wind brushed against his face, and he knew it had worked. He smiled, feeling victorious, but then a loud scream shattered the moment. A hooded mage leaped out of the shaman's shadow, letting out an ear-piercing shriek. Jin-Woo was taken aback. Something felt off. He quickly checked the mage's info screen, and saw something unexpected. Whoa, an elite knight. That's a new one for Jin-Woo. Up until now, he had only seen 3 types of shadow soldiers: regular, elite, and knight rank. But here was something entirely different. An elite knight rank soldier. This must be a step above Igris and Iron's knight rank. Jin-Woo thought, this guy's magic definitely packs more punch than theirs. After all, this soldier came from the boss of an A-rank dungeon. No big deal. Then the system chimed in with its usual request. "Patting, please choose a name." Just like before, whenever a shadow soldier was knight rank or higher, Jin-Woo had to give them a name. A name. Okay, he couldn't see this guy's face because of that hooded robe, but high orcs were known for their long fangs. Fang it is. As soon as Jin-Woo made his decision, the system automatically registered the name. And just like that, Fang LV, 1 elite knight rank replaced the question marks.